America. And welcome in Ryan McGee. You've long known him from ESPN. I've enjoyed his NASCAR coverage for years as one of the few guys that still does a weekly NASCAR segment. But he's here to talk about, of course, Marty and McGee, the radio show with Marty Smith. But he's here to talk about his new book, I think just released today, Sidelines and Bloodlines, A Father, His Sons, and Our Life in College Football. Good morning, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good, and I appreciate you. I don't get to cover as much NASCAR as I want to, but I still make them send me out there when we're allowed to travel.
Well, I'm not going to let you get out of here without a NASCAR question or two at the end. But let's start with the book, and I've read some excerpts last night and early this morning. It's such an interesting story. You wrote it along, of course, with your dad, Dr. Jerry McGee, longtime college football official, and your brother Sam, about his life, your dad's life through officiating, but how that bonded you as a family and really was about a lot more than football to the McGees. And this is the story and how it unfolded in your life, and it's pretty neat stuff.
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah, I mean it's listen. Why did you become a fan of a certain team? Or why did you love a certain sport? Usually, the answer to that is because your dad loved it, or your granddad loved it, or or where you grew up. It's just part of who you are. And for our family, I was gonna grow up loving college football anyway, just because I did, and just the sport and growing up in the Southeast like I did. But my brother and I were both afforded this behind the scenes access as kids and as adults. Dad was on the field for some of the biggest games played in the history of college football, and we had a chance to either be in the stands or watch nervously on television. My job was to record the games on VHS so Dad could watch them when he got home, and also just learning the game. I've talked to Nick Saban about this. He loves football because of his dad, because of Big Nick. And Big Nick was his original coach, in West Virginia back in the day. And, all of the things that Nick Saban does as a football coach now, why he loves the game, was based entirely on his relationship with his dad and playing youth football and high school football and college football. And so that's like it was for me. And so the sons of coaches, the children of coaches learn football in kind of a different way. And my brother and I learned football in a really different way. If there was a new halo rule on punt returns, well, my dad would explain it by getting my brother and myself and my mom and the dog and a chair and the ottoman and put us all in the den and explain, the rule. And so that's how I learned the game. And that was a gift. That's why I'm fortunate to keep covering it today.
You in the excerpt you released at ESPN.com, you talk about all the photos on the walls on the wall of your dad's home, and you call it the wall of screaming. And fans love it when college football coaches get on officials. But it was really neat because that you explained some of this, and you explained it, and obviously this is an excerpt from the book, but that, a lot of times head coaches are dealing with a lot of things, and what you see in regards to them getting on official, there may be a lot more to it than just a particular call. And in fact, you've got a picture out of Mike Shula giving it to your dad pretty good. But you talk about Joe Morrison, you talk about Jim Young, you talk about Dan Henning, and you kind of explain what went into those arguments or those situations. And it really was enlightening that we don't, we watch the games as media people, fans, and we see coaches and you think, well, they're getting on that official about a call. But sometimes there's a lot more to it than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite picture on Dad, Dad has a whole wall in his house and another one at his office, and it's all these pictures that we would find in local newspapers the morning after games. And my favorite one was Mike Shula. I mean, he is just, laying into Dad. And the best part is the Dad's completely ignoring him. Yeah. Like Dad, you can see Dad's filling out his penalty card. Folks don't know officials keep little cards in their pocket. They write down penalties in the game they called and why they called it so they can review it. And so Dad's looking at the scoreboard, like right now, and Shula's just laying into him. And Dad loves Mike Shula. But that night, Mike Shula was about, 5 weeks away from losing his job. And he knew that. And the pressure was mounting. And they were getting a game from Duke that day. And Duke was terrible. And so it just was, you're exactly right. You just never know, what's going on. And there's always a backstory. I mean, the most infamous, and it's in that excerpt on ESPN.com today, Dan Henning, who by most measures is a pretty level-headed guy. Mm-hmm. He was the head coach at Boston College, and live ESPN. He and Dad just started screaming at each other. And no one could believe it and Dad certainly couldn't believe it because Dan Henning just usually wasn't that way. But a few days later, it was revealed that a bunch of Boston College players had been betting on games that they were playing in. And so you're exactly right. You never know. But the vast majority of coaches were great. And to this day, in my dad's cell phone, he probably has 36 phone numbers of head coaches that he worked games. Everybody from Frank Beamer to Bobby Bowden to you name it. And because over the years they became colleagues. You know, if you're a coach, you need to understand the rules, and who better to ask than an official? And if you're an official, you need to understand the game, so who better to ask than a coach? And so during the off season, it was nothing for Danny Ford at Clemson to call our house because he had a question about, you know, a new rule that was being implemented, and Dad was always happy to answer. But that didn't affect how he called games on Saturday. But as a result, you know, once everybody's retired, they're friends.
Visiting with Ryan McGee from ESPN, his book, Sidelines and Bloodlines, A Father, His Sons, and Our Life in College Football, available today from Triumph Books. It's written with his father, Dr. Jerry E. McGee, longtime college football official, and his brother, Sam McGee, who's a lawyer in Charlotte. You mentioned those contacts and connections, and you said you were going to love college football anyway. There's probably a good chance you would have wound up being a sports journalist regardless. But growing up in that environment, having access to these guys, building these relationships, how much did that help you, your dad having been a football official, once you got into the media and started covering college football?
Oh, it helped me tremendously, and I write about it in the book to this day. If I'm covering a game, if I'm covering a national championship game, and my dad was a down-foot official, he was a field judge. So, you know, it's pass interference and it's ruling on catch or no catch and inbounds or out of bounds and, you know, tough pylon calls on touchdowns. And to this day, if there's a tough call like that, everybody in the press box will turn and just stare at me. And they're waiting on my dad to text and say, no way, that was DPI. Or, you know, that should have been so-and-so. And so they're waiting. You know, so to this day, I still lean on Dad when I'm covering games. But I had my first sideline credentials when I was 13. I just turned 13. I had a camera that Santa Claus had brought me. And I was on the sideline at Virginia. It was North Carolina at Virginia. Both teams were in the top 10. And Barry Word. Now, I took a great picture of it. And in the background, you can see this linebacker who has missed on the tackle. And he blew me up. I mean, he ran me over. And I probably weighed 90 pounds. And everybody was afraid I was dead. But the reality was, I thought it was the coolest thing that ever happened in the history of the world. And at that moment, I thought, I got to figure out, all these people are here on the sideline and getting paid to be here today. I have to figure out how to do this. And don't tell anybody, but ESPN actually pays me to go to games.
You know, Ryan, you've spoken often on ESPN and the SEC Network. You're proud of your Southern heritage and, of course, the NASCAR books you've written. I guess it makes sense for you that you would write a book about football and family, because that's two of the most Southern traditions that we have.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And listen, the reason that I love NASCAR, my dad was a gas can man for Dave Marcus at Rockingham and Darlington.
Mr. Wingtips.
Yeah, that's it. And my dad was in the Army with Dave Marcus. They're scrubbing toilets one day at Fort Bragg, and this guy from Wisconsin goes, hey, by the way, I'm a race car driver, and when I come to we were from Rockingham. That's where my family's from. When I come to Rockingham and Darlington, I need a gas can man. And my dad's like, okay, whatever, guy. And sure enough, 5 years later, the phone rang, and it was that guy from the Army, Dave Marcus, I need a gas can man. And so I love NASCAR because of where I was born in Rockingham and because of Dad. And I love college football because of Dad. So, yeah, I tell everybody all the time, I get to work the redneck beat, man. I work, I cover stock cars, and I cover college football, and that's not a bad gig.
No, it doesn't get much better. Speaking of college football, and this year is, you know, it's unprecedented, the times that we're living in. I want to ask you about where we're at right now, and clearly the ACC and the Big 12. Well, the Big 12 might regret playing the way it's going, but they cranked it up this past weekend. The SEC a week from Saturday. The Big Ten's rethinking it. Pac-12 still out there. Your take on having college football, is it important that we play, and is it a good thing that we're trying to play, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's important just for morale. I mean, the television numbers are what they are, and that very first weekend, Labor Day weekend, when there were teams that were on ESPN that had never been on big ESPN before, and everybody was watching. because they just wanted it. And so I can tell you, and I'm sure it's certainly the situation where you are. You just feel your heart rate pick up a little bit.
Yeah, you do.
It feels a little bit normal, right? And so, but that being said, I have fallen on the conservative side when it comes to my own personal approach to day-to-day life and how my family approaches, how we go out into the world and how we handle the virus. And my office has done the same. And so we're getting to that point where we're starting to get back, but doing it cautiously. And that's why I have always believed, as frustrating as I don't think it's been for some fans, the idea for the SEC to wait until the end of the month was great. And it was a part of me that wanted them to wait till October because, Greg Sankey told us, Commissioner of the SEC told us on Marty McGee, this was in early July. He said, well, we should take as much time as we can to really see what the situation is because everything changes so dramatically over the course of week to week. So I think going last is a good idea, and they're learning a lot right now from what they're seeing in other places. And everybody's just got to roll with it, man. Listen, if your team's scheduled to play 11 games and they only play 7, then like we used to tell my daughter when she was little, you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. That's way more. If your team plays 7, 8 games, it's way more games than I thought they were going to play if you'd asked me in July. And there's fans going to be there now, but at some point they might tell you can't come anymore. And if that's the case, then watch on TV and be happy about it. So in 2020, anything you can get to make you feel good, even if it's not normal, then you need to take whatever you can get. And that's my approach to 2020.
I'm with you 100%. A couple more minutes with Ryan McGee. We'll tell you how you can get his book here before we wrap it up. NASCAR was one of the first sports to crank it back up, pardon the pun. And we know, what happened at Talladega with Bubba and so forth. But for the most part, I know Jimmy Johnson had a positive test, Austin Dillon. But for the most part, Ryan, it's come off nicely. And we've had spectators at some events. It's not normal NASCAR, but when I'm watching a race on TV, I'll be honest with you, I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm just enjoying the racing. I think it's gone really well.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the reason that it's gone well is because everyone's done what they were supposed to do.
That's right. And
the only couple of times that crew guys have violated rules, they have been sent home and they've been fined. And they were all told way back in the middle of May. And I was at Darlington, when NASCAR came back. I had to stand in the parking lot, but I was there. And they told everyone. I watched them checking everyone, all 900 people, they checked into the racetrack. But everyone had to literally walk within the lines that were taped into the ground. They had to adhere to the policies. And anyone who did not and does not is sent home. And they were very serious about that and made that known pretty early. So, yeah, if everybody does what they're supposed to do, then, we just saw in the NBA, you had one player in that bubble who decided that, having a quote-unquote meeting with a friend was more important than the team. They sent him home because you can't put everyone else at risk because you decided to fudge on the rules. So, yeah, that's why it's worked. And everyone was watching NASCAR. And when NASCAR pulled it off, I think it gave a lot of other people confidence. I know for a fact that Greg Sankey of the SEC and John Swafford of the ACC were in contact with NASCAR frequently when they first came back to talk to them about how they were doing it. So, yeah, if you follow the rules, and I think this applies to life in general right now with this pandemic, if you just follow a small handful of rules, then you probably get to do what it is that you want to do. But if you don't complain to me when you're not allowed to do what you wanted to do.
Amen. Amen. All right. One final NASCAR question. Harvick and Hamlin have led the way. Keselowski, of course, making noise. But I want to ask you about a driver, if you're as surprised as I am by the season Kyle Busch has had. Not won a race yet. You never discount this guy. But, it's been one thing after another for that team. I'm stunned. I'm shocked.
Me too. What's crazy is that and really early on, there were guys within that team, just that 18 team, who said we're a little worried about not having practice. And I have not missed practice, and I have not missed qualifying, and I don't think that anyone has. If you've seen the product on the track, but Kyle Busch's team has, and it just tells you that part of their routine. Typically for most teams, the car they unload for first practice on Friday is the car they're going to have on Sunday. There aren't a lot of big, massive moves that you see teams make in practice like they used to 20 years ago. But I think Kyle Busch's team is different. And he has an engineering mind. And so I think he just has missed those extra laps to get that car ready. But I'm with you. I thought at this point they'd have figured it out. Listen, they're still there. They're still contenders. They're still hanging around. And he could still get on a hot streak. And certainly the way this system is, he could win a championship. He's done it before when he missed a third of the year.
That's right.
But I'm with you. It's the biggest shock of the year is that he has not won a race.
All right, ESPN's Ryan McGee, Sidelines and Bloodlines, a father, his sons, and our life in college football, written with his dad, Dr. Jerry McGee, and his brother, Sam McGee, out today from Triumph Books. Tell folks how they can get it.
Anywhere you buy books. It sounds funny to say that out loud and be serious about it, but it's true. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I know right here where I live in Charlotte, I've already got a text from a friend of mine that the book was on the shelf at Barnes & Noble. So anywhere you buy books, and my daughter's college fund appreciates the effort.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. Like I said, the excerpts were unbelievably enjoyable, and I appreciate the time. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Ryan.
Hey, always. I appreciate it.
All right, Ryan McGee with us from ESPN. Great book out, Sidelines and Bloodlines, a father, his sons, and our life in college football. We'll take our final break, and we'll be back to wrap up the show.